In my home province of Newfoundland and Labrador, when anyone meets a stranger, the first questions are, who are you called after, and who are your parents? The first page of our New Testament, the beginning words of the Gospel of Matthew, could well have been written by a Newfoundlander. In these words from this Gospel, we find the answer to these same questions about Mary. Her name, which we translate as Mary, was Miriam, and she was called after the woman named most often in the Old Testament, Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron. Miriam of the Old Testament led the women in a hymn of praise after the Israelites safely crossed the Reed Sea, was punished by God for challenging the leadership of Moses, was loved by the Israelites who associated her with life-giving water, and was named by the prophet Micah, together with Moses and Aaron, as the ones chosen by God to lead the people out of Egypt. The Gospel of Matthew assumes its readers knew their Old Testament really well and used images that make sense only in the context of the Old Testament. Miriam of the New Testament would have much to live up to in carrying the name of this woman who made a difference in the lives of her people during the most traumatic moment of their history as a people, the Exodus from Egypt and the wandering towards the Promised Land. The first verses of the Gospel give us the genealogy of Jesus, heard by most of us as a boring list of names. How far from the truth that is. On the surface, the genealogy, as would be usual, gives us the names of the famous male ancestors of Joseph, who was the husband of Mary, the mother of Jesus. A closer look, however, shows surprises that cause us to think again. Mary comes at the end of the line that begins with Abraham and includes David, two of the greatest figures of the Old Testament, both men closest of all others to God, men who trusted in God's promise. But that list also includes 4 women, and what women they are. Not the expected mothers of famous sons, but women who are outside the traditional structures. Tamar is a determined widow who demands and receives God's intervention to redeem her and signify her righteousness. Rahab does what is needed to support the Israelites' possession of the Promised Land, even though she risks death by doing so. Ruth has a loving and faithful relationship with her mother-in-law Naomi, mirroring the loving kindness which is the most named quality of God in the Old Testament. Bathsheba becomes the wife of David and a queen who strongly influences the people of Israel. 3 of these 4 women are not Israelites but foreigners. All come to know God in unusual and often painful circumstances. All show deep personal courage and unconditional trust in God. All are women who are partners with God in bringing about the fulfillment of God's promise. The genealogy, with its inclusion of foreign women as well as Jewish men, startles us into recognizing that God is present and active outside and beyond our expectations. The reader knows that God is about a new thing that is somehow linked directly with the person of Miriam. Later in the Gospel of Matthew, we will hear Jesus say, in response to a bystander who tells him that his mother and brothers are outside, "Who is my mother, and who are my brothers? Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." The woman whom we meet in the first chapter of Matthew, the woman named after Miriam and descending from the line of 4 unusual women friends of God, this woman, above all others, will do the will of the Father in heaven. She is mother not only because she gave birth to a son, but even more because she gave life every moment of her day by her presence, her loving kindness, her unconditional trust in God, her courage, and her unfailing belief in a God who hears the cry of the poor. The first pages of the Gospel prepared us for this woman coming among us. Jesus' own words confirm that the woman has indeed come among us. And so I ask, for whom are you called? Who among your ancestors holds a story that challenges and comforts and calls you to become the one whom God wants you to be? What is the new thing God is doing among you, among us today?